2 miles below the ice, in the coldest place on Earth, something is bending the planet's own gravity. Not a mountain, not bedrock. A single point of impossible density buried under the East Antarctic ice sheet, so heavy it warps the orbits of satellites passing overhead. We know it is there because we measured it from space. We do not know what it is. And every time someone gets close enough to find out, the drilling stops. It sits in a place called Wilkes Land. On a gravity map of the continent, it shows up as a bruise, a circular scar 300 miles across, with a dense core at its center that shouldn't be there. The mass is real. NASA's own satellites confirmed it. Something under that ice is pulling harder than the rock around it, and it is arranged in a near-perfect ring, a shape nature almost never makes on this scale. The official story is that it's a rock, a meteorite, they say, that struck before the dinosaurs. Case closed. But there is a problem with that answer, a fatal one. Nobody has ever seen it. Nobody has drilled it, sampled it, or touched it. In 70 years, not one physical fragment has ever been recovered to prove what it is. Everything we claim to know about the largest anomaly on the continent comes from measuring it at a distance, through 2 miles of ice, and then walking away. And here's what should stop you cold. The same continent that hides this dense ring also hides a lake the size of Lake Ontario, sealed under the ice for millions of years, and at one end of that lake sits a second anomaly nobody can explain. Two impossible masses, one frozen continent, and a pattern of expeditions that reach the edge of the answer and then, every single time, turn back. If you want to know what's actually down there, stay with me, because this channel investigates sealed sites and buried discoveries every week, and Antarctica is the most sealed site on Earth. What we're about to walk through is not one anomaly, it's 3. And the third one is still active. Let's start with the ring, because it's the one you can almost see. In 1959, a convoy of tractors crawled across a blank white plain in East Antarctica. It was called the Victoria Land Traverse, one of the first serious attempts to measure what lay beneath the ice with seismic charges and gravity meters. The men on that traverse recorded something strange. The gravity readings spiked in a place where, by every map they had, there should have been nothing but flat rock under the ice. A geophysicist named John Weihaupt fed the data to a colleague, Richard Schmidt, and in 1962, Schmidt did something bold. He proposed that buried beneath the ice was a crater, and at its heart, a mass so concentrated it could only have come from something that hit the planet with unimaginable force. For decades, it was a footnote, a curiosity. Then the satellites arrived. In 2006, NASA's GRACE mission, 2 spacecraft flying in formation precise enough to feel the tug of mountains from orbit, mapped the gravity of the whole Antarctic continent. And Wilkes Land lit up. There it was, a 300-kilometer mass concentration, a mascon, sitting inside a ring-shaped structure 500 kilometers wide. Not a smear, not noise, a dense plug of material at the exact center of a circular scar, more than twice the size of the crater that is blamed for killing the dinosaurs. The numbers are staggering. When Ohio State geophysicist Ralph von Friese and his team reworked the GRACE data in 2009, they described a mantle plug up to 425 kilometers wide and 5 kilometers thick, sitting under a subglacial depression 500 kilometers across. The crust beneath the site is thinned by 7 to 10 kilometers compared to the rock around it, as if something had scooped it out from below. Later work using the Champ and Ørsted magnetic satellites found something else. The site carries the largest crustal magnetic anomaly on the entire continent, not just dense, magnetized, on a scale nothing else in Antarctica comes close to. The mainstream reading is elegant. A giant object struck East Antarctica, punched through the crust, and the mantle beneath rebounded, pushing up a dense plug of deep rock that we now feel as excess gravity. Some researchers have gone further and tied it to the Permian extinction, the greatest die-off in the history of life, when nearly all species on Earth vanished. There's even a strange symmetry to it. The Wilkes Land site sits almost exactly opposite the Siberian traps, the vast volcanic scar tied to that same extinction, on the far side of the planet, as if one impact rang the Earth like a bell, and the shock came out the other side. And that may be exactly what it is. A wound from deep time. But notice what that explanation quietly admits. The models only account for about 90% of the plug's mass. Roughly a tenth of it is unexplained, uncompensated, sitting there heavier than the math says it should be. And the entire theory rests on a structure no human has ever physically examined. In the words of the researchers themselves, because of the ice sheet on top, there are no direct samples. None. We are told what the densest object on the continent is by people who have never seen it. That's the first clue. A ring you can measure but never touch. Now we get to the one that started the conspiracies. And it's wetter than you'd think, roughly 1,000 kilometers away, under the Russian station at Vostok, the coldest inhabited place on the planet, where the temperature once fell to minus 89 degrees. There is liquid water, a lake. 4 kilometers straight down, beneath solid ice, a body of water the size of Lake Ontario has stayed liquid for somewhere between 15 and 25 million years. It was confirmed in 1993 by satellite altimetry, an enormous flat patch where the ice surface was suspiciously smooth because it was floating on hidden water. For the water to stay liquid under that much ice, something has to be keeping it warm. Geothermal heat from below, a subterranean heat source in the deadest, coldest place on Earth. And when Russian and international teams surveyed the lake with airborne magnetics, they found the second thing that shouldn't be there. The magnetic field over the southern end of the lake is anomalous. The western half of the lake reads differently from the eastern half, as if something structural, something magnetized, sits under one edge of the water and not the other. A magnetic anomaly over a warm lake, sealed for millions of years, beneath the ice of a supposedly dead continent. The lake itself is a world unto itself. 16,000 square kilometers of water, more than 6,000 cubic kilometers of it, cut off from sunlight and the atmosphere for longer than there have been primates. The water at the bottom may sit near 10 to 18 degrees Celsius, warm, while the surface of the ice above records the coldest temperatures ever measured on the planet. Whatever lives in there, if anything does, has been evolving in the dark, alone, since before the ice sheet existed. The Russians drilled toward it. They had been drilling since the 1970s. Their borehole was called 5G, the fifth deep well. For years, they pushed down through the ice, 1,000 meters, 2,000. In 2009, the drill jammed and the hole was abandoned at 3,667 meters. And they had to deviate a new branch just to keep going. And then, with less than 50 feet to go, less than the length of a swimming pool between their drill and the water no human had ever touched, they stopped. They packed up, they filled the 2-mile hole with kerosene to keep it from freezing, caught the last flight out before the polar winter, and left the lake sealed for another year. They finally broke through in February 2012 at a depth of 3,769 meters. But even then, they couldn't sample the water directly. The drill could only bring back ice. The lake water had to surge up the hole and freeze over the winter before anyone could touch it. To this day, no one has put an instrument into the liquid body of Lake Vostok and looked around. The official reason was contamination, a legitimate concern. But sit with the pattern for a second. The densest anomaly on the continent, never sampled, and now the strangest lake on the continent, reached, then abandoned at the final 50 feet. Every instrument that gets close finds something, and then the investigation halts. That's the second clue. Now, here's the one no one can measure at all, because it comes from the sky. Antarctica has been mapped for less time than almost anywhere on Earth, and yet there are maps that appear to show it before the ice. The most famous is the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral, compiled from older source charts he said were ancient. Along the bottom, it shows a southern landmass, and a U.S. Air Force cartographer, in a 1960 letter that skeptics have argued over for decades, remarked that the coastline resembled the bedrock of Queen Maud Land, the shape of the continent under the ice, not the ice itself. The mainstream answer is that it's a coincidence, a misread coastline of South America. Maybe, but the map exists. It was drawn, and it shows a coast where, today, there is only white. And then there is what happened in 1946. The United States launched the largest military expedition to Antarctica in history. Operation Highjump. Nearly 5,000 men, 13 ships, an aircraft carrier, submarines, and thousands of tons of equipment sent to a frozen wasteland with no strategic value in the middle of a peace that had just been won. It was scheduled for 8 months. It ended in under 2. The task force commander, Admiral Byrd, gave an interview afterward that is echoed for 80 years, warning that the country should guard against the possibility of an attack from the polar regions by craft that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speed. A man who had just spent his life exploring the poles, coming home early, talking about things that could fly. We're told it was weather. We're told it was a routine exercise. But 5,000 men do not sail to the ice at the dawn of the atomic age to practice for nothing and then leave 6 months ahead of schedule. Something about Antarctica has always drawn the largest efforts and the shortest explanations. So step back and look at what we actually have. A ring-shaped mass so dense it bends satellites that no one has ever sampled. A warm, sealed lake with a magnetic anomaly under one shore, abandoned 50 feet from contact. Old maps that seem to show a coast beneath the ice. And a military expedition that arrived in force and fled early. 4 facts, 1 continent, and a wall of ice between us and the answer. Now, let's be honest with each other, because you deserve that. Does any of this prove there is ancient alien technology under Antarctica, humming away, still switched on? No. And you should be suspicious of anyone who tells you it's certain. The grounded explanations are real, and they're strong. The Wilkes Land mass is almost certainly a genuine impact structure or a deep mantle feature, a scar from a catastrophe hundreds of millions of years old. And that alone would make it one of the most important geological sites on the planet. The heat under Lake Vostok is most likely ordinary geothermal energy, the Earth's own furnace leaking through thinned crust. The magnetic anomaly is probably buried iron-rich rock, a natural intrusion, not a machine. The Piri Reis map is contested, and the resemblance may be nothing more than the human eye finding patterns in old ink. Byrd's words have been stretched and edited for 80 years. Every single clue has a conventional answer. That is true. And it matters. But here is what the conventional story still cannot do. It cannot show you the object. 70 years of measuring the densest anomaly on the continent, and not 1 gram of it has ever been held in a human hand. It cannot explain why the drill at Vostok stopped at the final 50 feet after 4 kilometers, at the one place a magnetic anomaly was waiting. And it cannot explain why the most remote, most worthless, most frozen land on Earth keeps pulling in the biggest expeditions and the fastest retreats again and again for a century. Even the grounded version is extraordinary. At minimum, buried under that ice is a record of a planetary catastrophe, a warm, sealed ocean cut off from the world for millions of years, and geology we do not understand because we have refused or been unable to go and look. A continent the size of the United States, and we have physically sampled almost none of what lies beneath it. If even the modest version is right, our map of the planet is missing a chapter. It would mean the largest structure of its kind on Earth is sitting under the ice, unexamined, while we argue about it from orbit. And it would mean the one place we call empty is the one place we have never actually seen. The anomaly is still there tonight. 300 miles of dense, ringed mass holding its shape under 2 miles of ice, tugging at every satellite that passes over the bottom of the world. The lake beneath Vostok is still liquid, still warm, still sealed. The borehole plugged with kerosene 50 feet from the water. The magnetic field over its southern shore is still bending. No camera has ever gone in. No sample has ever come out. The permits are still pending. The ice has not moved. And according to the instruments, the thing under Wilkes Land is still doing the one thing it has done for longer than there have been humans to measure it. It is still pulling, still dense, still waiting. If you want to see what else the frozen world is hiding beneath the ice, watch the next investigation on screen right now.